Okay, people who are joining this meeting, we are talking about the Code Assistance Project. And what do we have here? Great. Okay. So actually, one question that was raised is, wait a minute, there are two cases here. One is the syntactically correct assist in the semantics of code, and the other is semantically incorrect, try and fix the incorrect, I'm sorry, syntactically, I meant syntactically correct versus syntactically incorrect. This section here is about syntactically incorrect stuff, correct?
Correct, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and so the way this is triggered is if you evaluate this, then you will get a syntax error, and this is what you will see in the syntax error, is suggestions about where to add brackets, correct?
Correct.
And deleting, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Now, do we think that this is going to be indicated at any time when you haven't specifically done a shift-enter evaluation and seen a syntax error? Is there going to be a way to trigger this in a sort of check syntax type mode?
Yeah, I mean, so this touches on the other code assistance, just semantic problems, not necessarily wanting to tie it to shift-enter evaluations, because that specifically does create the impression in the user's mind that this is tied to evaluation, which is, if anything, the worst thing to do, because we could be running this before evaluation and just seem magical, and we're fixing code before you run it and everything. And so we've talked about adding a menu item.
Fine.
To do the checking. Yeah.
All right, I don't think a menu item is going to cut it. I think what we want to do instead is there's going to be some heuristic, probably based on time, I would suspect. If you leave so let's talk about how that might work. So for example, if you have a cell, see, it's hard to know what the workflow is here.
Yeah, I'm very worried about the notion of a time-based heuristic.
All right, I'm actually abandoning that temporarily. As I think about it, it doesn't make any sense. The question is, you've been typing, and I mean, honestly, you've been typing and you think it's correct. And did we get Noah in this meeting, by the way? I was just wondering whether was he able to join us?
He's not here now, but I can try to fetch him.
I was hoping he would be here. Okay. I had asked for him. Okay. Okay. In any case, so look, the one case we know this is going to happen is if you did a shift enter and you got this and you had a syntax error. So then the question is there another way to get that to happen preemptively? And there probably should be. In fact, look, yeah, what should happen is if you do code checking, if you ask it to check this piece of code, it should obviously check this. If it's not syntactically correct, it should do these kinds of things, right?
Yeah, I guess I just didn't realize that you were thinking of them potentially as two different things. Yeah, I agree that it should be
right. So this
the semantic and syntactic checks can just be one thing.
Right, but so that means that design-wise, this has to align with whatever we're doing for the squigglies underneath things when we think that they might be semantically wrong.
Well, can we do a semantic check if the syntactic stuff is
probably
off?
Not. Yeah. Probably not, which means we have to signal that. If you ask for a semantic check, but it's syntactically wrong, we probably need to make that more clearer.
Yeah,
fact,
like
we probably need to do.
Check, but it might be a moot point.
Okay, but wait a second. Can you do it or can you not do it? Can you do it for sub-expressions or not?
Yeah, we can. The parser proceeds with parsing even in the face of syntax errors. I mean, obviously the syntax error itself, the expression around that might be wrong and bad, but further down the line, things might still work fine and you could still get information back out. Yeah.
Okay, but if there is a possibility that nothing was done on the semantic checker, then I think we need some notifier that says the thing wasn't syntactically correct.
Sure.
Okay, but let's look at these designs.
Well, I think in general, even when you're, even when it's triggered by shift enter evaluation, having syntactic correctness looks significantly different from syntactic incorrectness looks significantly different from semantic incorrectness is important.
Okay.
So I don't think the appearance needs to be specific to you triggered it by hand, just in general.
And there are other modes, other actions, I suppose, that could trigger the checking. Menu item, yes, but also, possibly cursoring out of the cell. Like there are different events that could signal a fence post to say that it's now okay to do the check. I don't know what a full exploration of those would be, but
okay, that's not relevant to what we're doing here. Let's look at what we're doing here, which is specifically dealing with the graphic design of what happens to add a character. So I don't understand why it's blue to add a character. And I don't even understand what you mean by higher confidence levels. How are you intending to put in higher confidence levels there?
So
by the darkening of the bracket?
The confidence visually is meant to be indicated by the chevron combinations.
Okay, all right, okay, fine.
There were some percentages in the original mock-up, the working prototype from Timothy.
Okay, and we're also planning the darkness of the bracket to indicate the confidence in some way. Is that correct? The chevrons and the darkness of the bracket together, correct?
We can, yeah.
Okay. What I recommend in terms of the removal is that we use the pink metaphor. Since we've already got a pinking metaphor for other things, why not just do what you've indicated for hover? Why not pink box the bracket? Do you see what I'm saying? And
yes.
I would say, why not have the chevrons pointing downwards that mean you should delete it, so to speak? Chevrons pointing upwards means you should insert it. Chevrons pointing down means you should delete it. And personally, I think they should both be red. Well, probably. Comments from other people?
Yeah, I think that the idea of having two different colors was just to distinguish insertion from deletion, but I suppose if one is pointing up and one is pointing down, then that would kind of solve
I think that would work. I mean, Jeremy, do you have any comments on this? Is Jeremy with us?
Yeah, I was on mute. So if it was deletion, wouldn't the bracket be solid black already? Wouldn't go gray, would it?
I think that's a Brenton question. Brenton and John question.
I mean, John.
Sorry, if it was deleted, then I didn't.
No.
Deletion
So for deletion, probably the state we're in is the bracket is black. It has a pink background. It has that kind of pink background, pink box background, and it has chevrons pointing down. Okay.
If that's the case, I think that's good enough, right? One's gray, one's black. We have the down chevrons. I think that's enough of a difference.
I think so. And it's got a pink box.
I'm sorry, one's gray, one's black. I'm sorry, it's something I didn't follow there.
Yeah, so what happens is there are two cases you got to pay attention to know. There are two cases, okay? Case number one is insertion. Something is being added. Case number two is deletion, right? What I'm proposing is on deletion, the bracket stays black because it was already there. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. It has a pink box behind it.
Now, to be clear, it wasn't initially black.
What do you mean it wasn't initially black?
When you typed it in, it wasn't black.
What color was it?
It was purple, magenta. Sorry, I don't know how to identify the color, but because it was mismatched.
Additional. I see. Okay, then you should leave it whatever color it was. Okay, am I making sense? If it was magenta, leave it magenta. Okay, understood? Yes, Billy?
Yes, sorry, I was looking for the
Brenton?
mute button.
Also, in the insertion case, and I'm sorry, I should have caught this with Billy in an earlier meeting, but in the insertion case, I think when you mouse over, it would be good to have some kind of highlighting of the thing it's matching.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So, but let's go through again the visual design here, okay? So the visual design is brackets that are to be deleted do not change color. They stay their syntax coloring color, but they get a pink background and they get a down pointing chevron with the number of chevrons indicating the confidence. Does that make sense to people?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
One tricky thing here, which is maybe I just have to think about with Timothy, but is if you have multiple closing square brackets, they're identical. If he always identifies the last one, then that last one is probably going to be the one that will be magenta. But if his algorithm ends up choosing another one, that one would be black,
Right.
and another one.
There will be a preference to annotate the magenta one.
Yeah, yeah. So
That's
yeah, I'll just have to coordinate with Timothy on that.
Right, and on hover, indicating the matching bracket would be highly useful. But wait a minute, if it's being deleted, there isn't a matching bracket.
Right.
So there's
well, assuming, of course, the machine learning algorithm is perfect in that regard.
Yeah. But I think we're not going to be able to pick up the bracket matcher it will just confuse people to indicate there is a matching bracket when the machine.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
So I think there's nothing to hover. There's nothing to.
Yeah.
Okay. So then. Okay. So then what I suggest. Right. So on hover, I think it should just go to. Well, I don't know how deep you want to make the pink and so on, but I like the idea of the red border on. For the deletion case, right? And I mean, I don't know why on hover it doesn't just say, oh, on hover it has the tooltip, or not? Does it not?
Yes, it would have the tooltip.
Okay, so it's
I was
unclear
trying
to me
blue and
in that
opacity, but I think
tooltip,
regular gray would be normal.
Okay, in that tooltip, it is unclear what action is what I assume is the case is that if you hit the tooltip, you will delete that bracket. Is that not correct? Or what do you want to do there? John, I think that's consistent with other code assistant stuff. If you actually go to the bracket, you delete it. But in any case, the tooltip text is at best confusing. Because the delete, I mean, we understand, I mean, confidence 99% to most people. Yeah, I don't, the confidence thing, at best, we need to gray that down and make it smaller.
Okay.
I think it's sort of bullshit, actually. I mean, you know what? I don't think we should say it. I mean, we can put in something. It's like when search engines, in the early days of search engines, they used to tell you, you know, confidence of this match being whatever is whatever, and nobody cared.
I'm kind of agreeing with that.
I mean, I think the only thing that might be relevant is if there are 3 different bracket removals and somebody says, well, just give me the most probable bracket removal. But I think the way we want to do that.
I mean, we already have the combination, you know, chevrons there.
Right. And I think what we should do is those chevrons should be primarily, well, we need to understand the quantiles it's like grading curves or something. We need to understand the quantiles of where we put these different chevrons, right? Because we might have two equal. That requires a little bit of thought. Do you get what I'm saying? In other words,
yeah. Well, I mean, for example, the naive notion would be that the lowest one would be 0 to 25%, but then you would say, well, why wouldn't we just throw out anything below 25% because it's garbage?
Well, or if there's look, the basic issue is if the top ranked deletion is only a 26% confidence, what do you do?
Yeah.
Right. And I think we need to look at the case where. So first question is, how many deletions are we likely to be given? And this is a question for Timothy. I don't know the answer to that. If we think so, for example, one thing we could do is decide we're not going to support more than 4 possible deletions. We're just going to remove
and maybe that. I mean, I would suggest that it should probably be less. My own thinking is no more than 3 and maybe only 2.
Okay, fine.
Fine. Assuming, and I don't know if Timothy can figure this out, but I am assuming here that we're talking about 2 possibilities to solve the same bracket matching problem. There could, of course, be multiple bracket matching problems in an expression.
Indeed. So, okay, so then let's assume there are no more than 3 and that the chevrons represent, for now, his honest confidence in quantiles, in quartiles, basically. Do you see what I'm saying? I don't know whether that's going to work, but let's try that. So in other words, we rank the top 3. We take the top 3. If there is a dramatically lower probability for, and again, I think is Etienne here? Maybe he can speak to what we should do for this. If there are 2 at 80% and 1 at 5%, I think we just drop the 1 at 5%.
Agreed.
I guess so, yeah. And the case of, if you have 80% and one with 79%, giving them different chevrons
is stupid.
Well, if they're both really that high, they might not refer to the same bracket matching issue.
Yeah. All right. So look, we got to do some experiments. We got to put in some obvious heuristics here. Reject things that are dramatically lower.
But just to throw something out there, I would suggest as a possibility that it might be, if there's only 3, then it might be 40 to 60, 60 to 80, and 80 to 100, and then anything below 40 you just don't see.
Don't know, because if there's only one,
but something along those lines, maybe those numbers are completely off, but something along those lines.
But if you have just 1 and it's 20%, I think you do want to see that one, rather than seeing nothing.
Right.
Yeah, various comments on the live stream commenting about bad suggestions, feedback mechanisms. Yes, although probably not for this, because this is pretty low level. Yes, more so for other code assistance things, I think. Okay, let's talk about insertion. So we got deletion, and so that's downwards pointing chevrons, okay? Pinking and downwards pointing chevrons. So insertion, why don't we use magenta as the insertion color? Because that would be sort of, is that right, or does that not make sense? I don't think we want red as the insertion color. Upward pointing chevrons in some color, but probably not red. Although we do use a red caret to indicate, a missing argument. I don't know. What do people think?
Well,
other people? Yeah, go ahead.
Just remember, so if we're adding a bracket, like in the first example here, ignoring the fact that there were 2 square brackets, calling it, looking like it's part, but it's really contour plot. If we're inserting a character there, remember, there's always going to be the corresponding mismatched bracket, like at the beginning of, just after contour plot.
That's a magenta.
That is going to be colored magenta. So my intuition would be that inserting should also be magenta to just draw a like to draw your eye towards both of those being matching, that you would be inserting this and it matches with that other thing over there that is also the same color.
All right.
I don't know if magenta as a thing to be doing means an error, if people would be confused about inserting it, if it's magenta. I don't know. So
why are you putting that arrow there? I don't think that's right. It wants to be, the chevrons want to be underneath.
Even
Just
for
like an
insert,
insertion. Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're like an insertion caret. That's absolutely the right place for them. Now,
I mean, as far as magenta goes, you're going to have magenta in the deletion case too, though, so they're not going to be distinct if we want different colors.
When are we going to be magenta in the deletion case?
If it's unmatched, right, it's magenta.
Yeah.
No, the bracket itself is magenta.
Yeah.
But I'm saying the chevrons should be red in the case, should be downward pointing and red, probably, in the case where, in the deletion case, and should be upward pointing and magenta in the insertion case.
It's like gray bracket with up magenta versus magenta bracket with red down. It just somehow
okay,
not seeing.
Make a different suggestion.
Yeah.
I mean, what we'll see is a magenta, matching bracket here, and then let's see. And I don't know why this is magenta. I mean, shouldn't it be black? Because it is going to be the thing that makes it black. You see what I'm saying?
Well, the problem with black is spotting it.
Well, but it's got a great big chevron underneath it.
Well, what color is a chevron?
Chevron. I'm not sure. Do you think gray is a better color to spot?
No. I think any gray level is going to be problematic.
But remember, we're not sure it's correct, so we don't want to color it. Look, I think we should try coloring it gray. And
it wouldn't be a problem if the bracket itself were black or gray, but it needs some color around it, really calling attention to it.
I know, but it's going to have the chevron underneath. I think it's going to be pretty obvious.
But it depends on how much wall of text you're looking at.
Let's try it. Let's put the chevron in. What color should we try for the chevron?
Someone from the live stream is saying magenta and pink may be too close.
Yeah. I know. That's a separate issue. Well, let's get a design done, and then let's worry about either it or high contrast versions of it that are relevant for people with reduced color vision and so on. That's a second order issue here. Let's get something that works first. Okay, so what color should we try by default? What color should we start off with? Does it make sense to start with magenta, or will that look like an error? We could try your blue, I suppose. Anybody object to trying blue? I mean, we're going to have to determine what this what this seems like once we have it. So, anybody object to trying blue?
Is there a complementary color for magenta? I don't know.
Nobody will know it. It's yellow.
Green.
Is it?
That might be bad.
green, I think, seems wrong because we use it for local variables and all kinds of things like that.
So one of the things that I'm thinking about is what the hover effect would look like, and I mean, I think we want some splash of color to use for the hover effect because we want to show the thing you're matching against. So if, like, the blue chevrons turn into a blue hover effect, does that also mean a blue hover effect on the matching bracket?
Yeah. What about greening? How does this relate to greening? Isn't this the quintessential greening case?
Well, so greening, what's done right now is all about the text caret placement. If you don't actually have your selection there, it doesn't green. We don't do any hovers on green. Now, I'm not saying we can't.
But that metaphor, the greening metaphor, now that I think about it, does seem relevant to this, doesn't it?
Maybe.
Because it's indicating matching.
Well, matching specifically on one thing of interest.
You mean the head? Because I mean, this could match. This could green up.
Well, I mean, it's not. So I mean, we green potentially two things. One is a head, and the other is just the matching delimiter, which in the case of a non-square bracket would be not. I mean, it could be like curly brace or association or something like that.
No, I understand that. But in the case where there is a head, we might as well indicate the head in the matching hover.
I would call more attention to it just by virtue of taking more space.
Right, which is a good thing. Don't you agree?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm thinking something related to the greens. Maybe the hover, maybe the thing, I mean, I don't like the idea of using green for the chevrons because I think that suggests that it's definitively correct, which it might not be. Oh boy.
Even at 99% confidence?
Who knows? Who knows? We need experience with it to know what the heck the story is. It shouldn't be green anyway. I don't know. We could try this blue and then we could try going to green for the hover effect. I'm not sure. Jeremy, any thoughts?
Green could work. I think green's okay. The green-red is interesting.
No, but we cannot use the green for the chevrons. That will not be sensible, I don't think.
Well, I think you want to match your chevrons with whatever the left-hand side, bracket match or, function head. You want those two to match up to create a pair.
All right, well, maybe we can try some version of green for this. Maybe a dark green. I'm not sure.
I think the blue's not bad, but I like this idea of contrasting colors between addition or deletion and insertion.
All right, well, let's try the blue then. But then the problem is, then that means we're going to have yet another color, not green, be the highlight here, which seems wrong to me. See what I'm saying? All right, you guys have got to try this. Try making some mock-ups of it. I think it's that the hover color should be green, but I don't think this should be green. Maybe we can get away with having that be dark green and having the hover be some kind of light, low opacity green as it is in the greening stuff. Am I making sense?
Mm-hmm.
That would be actually my best guess, is a very dark green for this. Billy, you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, with respect to these things here, this is the wrong part of speech. I mean, this is the wrong, what is it saying? It says, this is probably, how, in the other code assistance stuff, how do we describe an action that should be taken?
Don't really have actions like this.
Or do you mean
not that I can think of? Or unless you're referring to Brenton's other stuff.
I'm talking about Brenton's other stuff.
Oh, sorry. Then
originally the text, it was saying, did you mean something? And people are familiar with that kind of language inside of, editors.
Okay.
To do that replace, obviously that implies, replacing whatever you have with what it's asking you if you meant.
Okay, the question, okay, so we could do that here if the button meant, if it means delete, then we could just have the button say delete bracket or something, or delete, and not say that we thought something was wrong, but then that button has to actually be one that you can mouse into and do the deletion. And I don't know what happens then on mobile.
Well, I was going to say that I've been evolving with more feedback from for the text. I've been evolving the messages from saying, did you mean this or that, to being more, direct, I suppose, is a way of saying it. And so with these, I mean, obviously, I don't want to say, extra bracket ? Or extra bracket period, but making some kind of statement.
Well, the question is, does it take an action? How do you take an action to delete the bracket? Can you do it by mousing into this thing? It would be nice if you could, because then you don't have to be clicking with the cursor and do a bunch of actions to remove the bracket. If you can see plainly this is the wrong bracket, why not just mouse into this button and delete it?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So I would say that it should just say delete.
Sure. I mean, if we even want the text, it might be.
We want the text. Otherwise, it's completely unclear what's going to happen.
I mean, strike throughs, and I mean, I don't know. There might be some kind of graphical language. Okay, I mean, yeah. I mean, we can definitely include it, obviously. But
we just want a button. When you hover over the thing, there's a button that allows you to take the action of deleting it. Okay, that's what I think we should do. And I don't know what the button should look like and how it should make it clear that it's an action button.
Well, I think then in that case, it'll be more uniform with what currently is being proposed for the linter messages.
Fine. Okay. All right. Very quickly, let's try and take a look at the other. Whoops. What was that other thing there?
So I just had a thought about the whole tooltip versus button thing. So why don't we just have it in mouse over, just expand the chevron out into kind of a fully fledged button with text?
Nice. Yeah, that's basically what we're proposing here. Yes.
Yeah.
Or some kind of notifier-like thing that's like a, what are they called? A cartoon character saying thing. What the heck is that called? The thing with the little speech bubble.
Yeah. But the point being is the chevron is always a button, but when you mouse over it, it expands into a larger button.
I see what you're saying. I see that the chevron, that you could just click the chevron if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice idea. That's a nice idea, especially since it has the downward pointing thing. So somebody has to figure out the touch analog of this stuff. By the way, so Carl on the live stream was asking about using things like GPT-2 as that is exactly what this is doing. This is a machine learning story that's dealing with this bracket matching. Ethan is asking for auto formatting stuff, and I'd like to know from Brenton, what's the state of your airy versus unairy line break?
Yeah, actively being worked on. So yeah, I
Excellent.
mean, we were saying before, the live stream started. So that is, I could have even mentioned that. That's one other big thing.
That's
actually,
an extremely important area. How is it going?
Yeah, good. There are some foundational papers with code formatting that I've read through, and I'm, going through, the mistakes that people have made in the past, and in doing all of this, and, not wanting to bring in gigantic constraint engines or anything like that, but my current philosophy right now is to be trying to retain as much of the current formatting as possible. So basically, code formatters work by first throwing away all of the white space and then starting from scratch. But
I'm not sure that's the right thing to do. I don't think it's the right thing to do.
Well, I mean, I'm saying that's what, other people do.
Yeah, but I don't think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. So it is requiring, but it's good because my parser, it works just fine retaining all the white space.
Okay. I would love to have a
working with
meeting about this before you spend a huge amount of time inventing all these heuristics, because I think we can probably help with this.
Sure. Yeah.
So maybe within the next week or so, we can try and meet about that.
Yeah.
By the way, Brian on the live stream is pointing out that if the tooltip causes an action, then undo should revert it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that will come for free.
Okay. Okay, so this is our squiggly. I wish there wasn't a dot there for the little bit extended squiggly. That the eye is drawn too much to that dot. But in any case, okay. Hover over code. Okay. Hover into the code assistance area. This is nice, except I don't believe in, I think Roman numerals don't make it. Why do you want to put those Roman numerals there?
I think they came up in conversation, but I think I could remove them. Yeah. It was part of the what does dismiss mean, and then there was going to be some extra dismissal options, and then those got removed from the mockup, and just replaced it with the question of what does dismiss mean.
I agree that it needs something to make sure that these are, well, I don't know. I mean, you have arrays of buttons. I mean, usually I see, the reason that this looks odd is because usually that will be a menu of some kind. Not, is that even true? John, what is confusing about this? I mean, two separate buttons. You're used to having two buttons in UIs that are horizontally aligned. You're less used to having two buttons vertically aligned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's more common to have a menu without a gutter between those two things.
And of course, we could have an X to dismiss, but it's
well, in general,
those are typically on the right, which would be a pain in the butt in this case.
I don't think we want
dismiss here means clear, right? As opposed to just close window. And the X would mean close window, I think.
Yes, that's correct. And we might want an X as well over on the right just for convenience, but.
Well, and just clicking away should also be closing the little pop-up.
Well, is this on hover or is this on click? If it's on hover, then you don't even need to click away.
This is on click, isn't it? Oh no, this is on hover into the code assistance area.
So on hover over Linux, the little guy pops up.
I'm not sure this is going to work because I think some things will be zero cross-section, so to speak. In other words, there won't necessarily be, what do we do when the squiggly is indicating something which is of zero size?
That is a good question. So one issue, an example.
I think in that case, we'll just have something which is some kind of squiggle notifier. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, no. Just an example of that for people is implicit times when you didn't intend it between symbols or between lines where technically the thing doesn't even exist, and so what are you? Where's the squiggly line?
So we're going to need to have something which is a squiggle box, so to speak. What is this case here? This is when there are multiple issues associated with that thing. Don't we have multiple layers of squiggliness in that case? I mean, I don't think this will be very common, the multi-case. By the way, I think here this should just look like a menu. I think we should just forget the gutter, forget the numbers, just make it look like a menu.
Okay.
So it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brenton, but it seems to me that the more likely scenario for the multi-case is where the two errors have different scopes.
Oh, so, that's absolutely, yes.
That's what I think too.
Like when having two errors with the same severity, same scope, is even more rare and even contrived, I would say.
Fine.
So, but that then also raises the issue of, I mean, if, for example, if you had one error which covered the entire switch statement and another error which covered just a
Yes.
string in the switch statement, how would that be? How would you even see that visually?
Yeah. It'll look like a rainbow of squiggly lines, like a spectrum. Yeah.
Why is there a spectrum? They're all red.
Well, if the whole switch statement might be something less severe, and a single
Wait a minute.
statement,
What is the severity level?
severe.
The severity level is being indicated with what? With the grayness of the squiggly?
Well, the color.
Okay, but I think it should go from red to gray.
Or, okay, whatever what we want to call that. Yeah, I'm not.
Or red to pink, probably. I don't know. We need that, Billy. We need some kind of or
My
is it
thinking
going?
is just, orange and green and blue, but yeah, I mean,
No way it's green.
yeah.
No way it's blue. I mean, whether it goes to a thing where the hatchings, I think it's probably going to look ridiculous to have the hatchings be alternating in a certain, Morse code or something.
But if it is simply going from red to pink, then that makes the problem of having a more severe problem nested within a less severe problem, that much less visually distinctive.
No, because I think it's got to be multiple layers of squigglies. I don't think.
Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah.
And I don't know what can happen. I mean, I assume that the squiggly will just have to be further down. And if it overlaps other code, it overlaps other code. Does that make sense? John, what would you do? John, what's the...
Well, so one thing we could do, and this might look like crap, but whoever asked me about design, is we could have the squigglies by default have a certain level of opacity, and then any place where they're double painted, they'll get brighter.
I don't know if that will work. Design folk, what do you think?
I don't know if it will.
And it also is not clear that the hatchings will line up, because those hatchings are determined by the,
Well, we can fix that.
Okay, but design folk, what do you think about the idea of squigglies of higher and higher opacity? Jeremy, Billy?
I'm thinking, I'm not sure how that's going to look. So it'll be stacked. Could it go either way? I mean, as far as squigglies might start out light and go dark, or start dark and go light, depending on the severity.
Because there's something in the middle of, okay, you've got a low severity error, low severity suggestion, which has a lightly opaque squiggly, and somewhere in the middle of that, or even overlapping its end, is a high severity one, or even overlapping its end is another low severity one. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, all completely possible. Yeah.
Which means, unfortunately, that the overlap at the end is not going to work, because that will mean that the place where it happens to overlap will go darker, and it will look like a third thing.
Yeah. Well, hold on though. Doesn't that mean that that's a very problematic area of code?
Oh, come now.
If it has two errors,
I know, but it's just going to look confusing, because it's going to look like there are three different errors, and in fact there are only two, but they're overlapping. So the only way to avoid that, which again is a big mess, is to stack the squigglies. But if we stack the squigglies, who stacks on top? You see what I'm saying? Which suggests that we shouldn't try and stack the squigglies. I mean, I wonder whether we have a chance to have them, whether with decent probability they will not align, so that they're cross-hatchings, so you'll be able to visually see them, because one of them will be a different cross-hatch. In other words, the eye will pick up the fact that it's periodic, and it will continue into the other area. I don't know. We'd have to try that. I think that might work. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I threw something in the chat just to visualize the idea of something getting darker through opacity. Don't trust my choice of color here, but I mean, the big problem here is that the single level is kind of light.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm okay. Okay. Here's what I suggest. Okay, I have a crazy idea that the periodicity of the cross-hatchings will allow the eye to see which cross-hatchings are with which other ones. Do you understand my idea?
Are you talking about phase or are you talking about frequency?
No, I'm talking about phase.
Okay.
Do you understand my idea? What I'm saying is, if you've got two superimposed squigglies and you assume that their phase is started, and you don't want to start with that dot. You want to start the squiggly always at the same point. The left-hand end is always an up squiggle, so to speak. See what I'm saying? I have a crazy idea. What?
Sorry, when you were talking about phase, I thought the whole idea was you would start in a different point for a nested one.
No, I'm saying you use the following heuristic. Okay, the left-hand end of the squiggly always starts on an up squiggle. There's no dot, right? You understand it? It starts on a complete.
Yeah.
I don't know what you call those things.
Sure.
What do you call those things? Is there a name for those things? Strokes, whatever.
A line.
Okay. Well, you start on you have a whole stroke there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we are using the heuristic belief that most of the time, the point at which another squiggly will start will not be an integer number of stroke widths away from the part where the previous one started. And I'm making the speculation, which may be incorrect, that the eye will see, when you superimpose those two things, that you will see them as each one as integrated, so to speak. Do you see what I'm saying? So in other words, if you have two
I see what you're saying. I mean, on the one hand,
I don't know if it's true.
On the one hand, I think it will be easy to call out. On the other hand, I don't think it will look particularly pretty. I think it will look like a mess.
Let's try it.
But that may be okay.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's not terrible.
You should clean up your code then.
Right.
If anything, just to make it more aesthetically pleasing. So just asking if there was any consideration of higher frequency squigglies.
Oh, I see. Changing the frequency of the squiggles. Well, that's another way that you could get this. Look, we have to try this thing of overlapping ones. It may be
end up with moire patterns in your squiggles.
Moire patterns. Yes, yes, you would. Well, you will even you'll end up with moire patterns when the two things are. Oh, I see. When they're different frequencies. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, you'll just end up with a this comb effect. And I can't remember whether the optical illusion with combs causes you not to be able to see them or to be able to see them. And that's clearly the deciding factor in whether this makes any sense. So the other question is,
sorry,
what's that? Go ahead.
I was going to say, instead of using slashes or squigglies, could you just use different shapes like dots?
Well, but how would you pick for the different things? I mean, in other words,
well,
okay, this reminds me deeply of the issue of pronouns in languages. When you say, languages that have multiple genders for nouns, for example, you say you have a few extra pronouns as opposed to saying, there, it's, whatever, but you don't really know what it refers to. But nevertheless, languages still manage to work. So one possibility here, we could use the heuristic fact that different severity areas might have, whatever we do is going to be heuristic. If we have multiple things of the same severity. So your suggestion, Noah, is to have a repertoire of different kinds of indicators relevant to different severity levels. Somehow those have to be in a grammar that fits together, but I agree that you could have something which goes from essentially dots to essentially these strokes.
Sort of like the density between the differences. I think where you guys were sort of talking about, I was sort of originally trying to think of it like, if you could put like a 3-line cellular automata underneath the word, the more dense the pattern is, the more, intense the
Yeah, right.
error.
But I mean, the basic question is, we need a collection of these things so the idea of having the form of the squiggly be slightly different for different severities is a way of essentially adding more pronouns in effect. I mean, it's going to be heuristic. It's not always going to work. The things might collide, but
And in reality, we only need two, really. Like two things overlapping is 99 point whatever percent of all cases. So like we don't
Okay.
need to go too
Well,
crazy, but
uh,
considering two at least. But
Right. By the way, I
if we start
noticed on
worrying
the
about more like that, then we might have to like rethink why we're thinking about more. But really, in reality, in practice, at most, I've only ever seen two.
well,
overall.
we'll find that. I suspect as we build this out, we'll get more than that. But including some, I think we'll get some that are low priority. That's the point. I think we don't want to feel, oh my gosh, we can't add a low priority suggestion because it will mess everything up.
By the
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
another option to consider, since we have, these angular lines here, is we can rotate the angles.
Yeah.
It becomes a cross.
2 down, they become crosses. 3 down could, become, most of an asterisk, that kind of thing.
But wait a minute. We don't want the case of two overlapping things, right? We don't want something that looks like three cases. What we could do, I suppose, it's a little bit weird, is a random rotation of the lines for each error. Because if we did that, then I claim, maybe, that visually you will be able to see the overlaps correctly. See what I'm saying? So
I'm not sure what random gets you that what I just said doesn't get you.
Okay, because the whole point is when you have an overlap, right?
Mhm.
We have two things that overlap. What you want to do is you want to get it so that the eye can distinguish what thing is just an overlap versus what thing is yet a third piece. See what I'm saying?
Yes. So the overlap essentially, looks like a second reverse barber pole overlaid on the original barber pole.
Yeah, but how do you know which? The point is that because you don't know which one is going to be where, you have to pick random. You can't pick some organized sequence. I mean, I suppose you could pick it depending on the starting point, but somebody is suggesting on the live stream, order them the squiggles by each one by length, but they're in line. That won't work. It's a partially ordered set. It doesn't have because you can have a two.
So you're worried about the case where you have a series of partially overlapping squiggles.
Exactly. Right.
I'm not sure if that's even possible, but
well,
yeah.
I'm sure it's possible. I mean, okay. Your statement is that might not be possible.
I was thinking more about squiggles
tree.
being nested rather than partially.
Yeah, I understand.
With implicit times, all things are possible.
Okay.
Like next.
I mean, so in other words, the expression tree. This is not simply a linearization of the expression tree, which would have a nested structure.
Yeah.
I bet it isn't. I bet there are cases that are not.
Well, I mean, even implicit times has a precedence.
All right. So this requires more thought. But I think we can go ahead and implement, some version of what you have here just to see what it looks like. Ali on our live stream is saying he hopes he isn't going to be forced to use code assistance. Our goal is to make it like syntax coloring, where very, very, very few people switch it off, if any, because it just works nicely.
I just have more questions about why he wouldn't want to use it now.
Well,
I mean, certainly,
the suggestions bar has not
a legitimate concern is that you don't want it to be slow. You don't want it to be slow. You don't want it to get in the way.
But that's why we care about triggering it.
Yeah, you don't want it stealing keystrokes. You don't want it stealing mouse clicks. I mean, these are all legitimate concerns.
I know. So it will be triggered, and we still have to decide this. It will certainly be triggered on Shift Enter, and it will be triggered hopefully by something in the right, in the menu bar on the right. Something like this, right?
Well, that presupposes that already exists in that cell bracket, though. After
I understand, but what caused it to bother to look at the code is the question.
Yeah, I mean, some menu item is the other.
I know, but that's not going to work.
And then a second question is, with what resources did it look at the code?
Yeah, well, I think we know we
Um,
need to have another kernel to look at this.
Yeah.
And I think it should happen asynchronously. And if it sees something, it should put up that red dot on the right-hand side, and then you can look at it. And there should also be a way to preemptively, I think this is what we decided last time, there should also be a way to preemptively ask it to look at it.
Well, that's what. Yeah, I mean, what would that mechanism be?
I told you, something in the gear menu on the right, or a menu item.
Yeah, but where did the gear menu come from, like to begin with, though? Because that's
the gear
not
menu is
clear.
part of the cell. Okay, on the cloud, the gear menu is already part of the cell bracket. We're going to add that in the desktop.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. All right. I have to go to a different meeting. People who are following the live stream are actually going to have another live stream coming up right in just a few minutes. Thanks all. See you all soon.
Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye bye.